In this video, we're going to give you an out-of-the-box solution about how to install the 4-4 defense into your youth program. Let's check it out. The first thing we're going to talk about is alignment. And if you are not familiar with football alignments, we're going to reference this chart right here. And this chart's super important because it's going to tell your players where to line up. So the first thing you should do with all of your players from a defensive line and linebacker perspective is teach them this chart. That way they can get lined up properly. So the easiest way to teach this is every head up number is going to be an even number. So head up the center is going to be a 0. Head up the guard is a 2. Head up the tackle is a 4. And then if there's a tight end in the mix, head up the tight end is going to be a 6. So those are all even numbers, 0, 2, 4, 6. And then next we have the inside shade is we just take the head up number and put an I on it. So obviously you can't get inside of the center, so there's going to be nothing there. Inside the guard is a 2I. Inside the tackle, we take the head up number, which is a 4. Inside shoulder is an I. And then if we do have a tight end in the mix again, it's going to be head up a 6. Inside shoulder is going to be a 6I. And then when we talk about odd numbers, those are going to be on the outside shoulder of the player. So outside shoulder of the center, because you can get outside of him, is going to be a 1. Outside shoulder of the guard is going to be a 3. Outside shoulder of a tackle is going to be a 5. And then if we do have a tight end in the mix, that's going to be a 7. And if you really want to flex him out, that's also known as a wide 9. A lot of NFL teams will use wide 9 techniques. So as long as you understand that numbering system, then we can start to position our players based on where we want them. So for this look here on our alignments, we're going to talk about the most basic front, probably in football, and that's going to be a 31 front. And what a 31 front is we are always going to put our 3 technique, which is going to be our tackle right here, a 3 technique, outside shoulder of the guard. He's always going to go to the field or to the tight end. And what we mean by the field is if the ball is on the hash like this, there's more field this way, so we're going to put him over there. If we want to put him to the short side of the field, that's called the boundary. So you'll hear me reference that throughout the video, field and boundary. For now, though, we're always going to tell our 3 technique in our 31 call that he's always going to go to the field. And then the 31 is going to be the nose in a 1 technique. You also can play him in a 2I if you'd like to. And of course, that's completely up to you. But I found the easiest way to teach this is we're always going to try to get hands on that center. And the 3 technique is going to be the tackle. 1 technique is going to be the nose. Our defensive ends are always going to be in 5 techniques no matter what. So outside shoulder of the tackle and then outside shoulder of the tackle here. I made it nice and easy. I labeled the defensive ends just defensive ends. You can give them names if you want. If you have similar players on each side, it really doesn't matter. So we're just going to leave them as DE for defensive end and, of course, NT for nose and tackle. Next, getting to the linebackers, we have our W, which is our Will, our S, which is our Sam, M, which is our Mike, and then R, which is our Rover. And the way we align our linebackers is we just take the number of that we just taught you with the 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and we just add a 0 to the end of it. So in this 31 front, our Sam backer would line up in a 10 technique. Okay, so he's a 1 technique, you add a 0 to it, he's in the 10. And then you notice over here, he's going to line up in a 30 technique, a 3 outside shoulder of the guard. Just add a 0 to it, and there's your 30 technique. So if you notice, and if you're teaching younger players too, the easiest way to teach this is there a butt in your gap? No? Good. You have that gap aligned right there. I found that to be the easiest way to teach it. Get lined up. You can say 30-10. If you want to be more specific, that's fine. Or you can say, hey, is there a big old butt in your gap? Nope. Good. Then you have that gap. So that's how we get aligned. Now, looking at the perimeter with the W and the R, our W is always going to what we call apex, the tackle, and the slot receiver right here. So if we get a 2x2 look like this, he's always going to play apex, meaning what is the middle point between this player here at right around 3.5 to 4 yards. Depending what team you play, you can move them up closer, but I think 3 to 4 yards is the sweet spot. But I want to play in the middle of both of those. That way, if a run does leak off this way, we don't get picked off by the Y coming down and blocking us. So if he comes this way, we can get underneath it and we can play it. That's why we apex that player to the halfway point. Next, The same goes for the rover on the backside. Same thing. He's going to apex in between the middle here, and he is going to be secondary support with the run, not trying to get picked off by that 8. Next, we're going to look at the corners. I like the corners to be 7 yards off, 1 yard to the inside. Slow back pedal. We do not want to fly out of there because that will give more cushion for the wide receiver to catch a hitch route. So we want to slow back pedal out. Same here, 7x1. You can play with this if you want. If you face a team that doesn't really pass much, you can move them up to 5 yards and play the run. Completely flexible for what your personnel is and the teams you face. Free safety, I like it about 10 yards. And this player needs to be able to run the alley both ways. Get downhill this way, and also be able to play the pass, which we'll talk about in the coverage section in just a minute. But that's our base alignments if we call 31. So as a defensive coach looking at this, you can just signal to your defense 31. And that means they're going to get in a 3-1 and they're playing cover 3 behind it, which we'll talk about in the coverage in just a second. But the biggest part about defense, just get lined up properly. Make sure all your gaps are fit, and that way you can stop the run. Because stopping the run is obviously the key at any level of football. So now when we talk about gap responsibility, so if I'm in a 3 technique, my helmet is on the shoulder of this guard, I own that B gap. So going back to our chart here, we talked about the A gap each side of the center, B gaps in between the guard and tackle, C gaps outside the tackle, and then D gap, of course, would be if we had a tight end, he would be outside that tight end. So those are the gap responsibilities. So the tackle here owns this B gap, meaning if the ball is going to be run through that gap, that tackle needs to be able to play off of that guard and be able to make a tackle through that gap. The nose has this A gap here. The defensive end, being in a 5 technique, is going to own the C gap to the outside. Same thing here. Defensive end is going to own the C gap to the other side. Now, if we look at the linebackers, open butt, okay, open gap. We have right here, we have the A gap, and then this player here is going to have the B gap. So when the ball is run, this is what it should look like eventually. There should be a brick wall right there where there's nowhere to run because there's no open gaps to run through. So that's ideally what we want when we're trying to stop the run, is to create that brick wall up front and nobody can run through. Next, we're going to talk about the W and the R. These are alley players, meaning they're going to fit this alley right here if the ball is to leak off to the outside. Same with the defensive ends. They are in the C gap. Their job is to contain. So you notice any run to the outside, you should get this action right here, and the ball should be funneled back to the middle where all your help is. So that's the whole premise of this 4-4 defense, is how can we funnel the ball back to where our help is and not necessarily where our help isn't, with the safety having to run a long way to be a support player. You keep it more in the middle. This free safety can also support. So now you're trying to fit with close to 9 players. But as far as the basic gap fits, nose and tackle and defensive ends, as long as they fit up and linebackers move forward, you should be able to create that brick wall. Next, with the corners here, they want to try to set the edge of this defense. So if the ball, for whatever reason, you get this jet action right here, the worst thing we want is for this guy to get pinned to the inside. And now you have this, and he's probably gone down the sidelines. If you're a youth coach, you've been coaching youth for a few years now, it's probably happened to you many times, right? Their best player gets the ball on the edge, and he rips down the sideline. So what we want to do is, yes, we start inside leverage, but as this guy comes to block us, I want to try to rip to the outside and try to force this ball to cut back. That way my safeties and rovers and linebackers can then get to the point of attack. So that's what we're looking at from our corners, and that's our base run fits and gap fits on day one. So everyone needs to know what their gap is. So as a coach, when you call it in, hey, we're going 31, 31, they know I'm going to line up. And you ask them, what gap do you have? They should repeat back to you. If they're the Sam, I got the A gap. Good. Mike has the B gap. And of course, they need to know that, let's say if you are playing the 3 technique to the field, he goes this way and he goes this way. Well, now the gaps change. Where's there not a butt in the B gap? Where's there not a butt in the A gap? And you can play from there. Some other things you could do with the front, you could always put your tackle to the left-hand side. Now, teams may figure that out and always run to the other side, which could happen. So I always recommend putting it to the field. But again, you know your players better than I do. If you have a hard time getting lined up because the guys get confused with where the field is, just always put them left, always put them right, and just live with it from there. Hey, Coach, real quick before we get to coverages, if you want to learn more about how to play against pulling guards, how to play against tight end wing sets, and even blitzes to add to the 4-4. You can check out our membership below, Victory Pro. It's going to have that plus more defensive schemes that you can install into your defense. So be sure to check that out in the description below. Now back to the video. So now we're going to talk about what if there's a tight end in the mix, which you probably see a lot. So if we get a tight end here, again, we're going to leave our defensive end in a 5 technique. And we're just going to move this player up into the outside. I like him about 2 yards off the football, 3 yards width. So 3 by 2 here. And then he's now responsible for any edge contain. If you do happen to get any jet sweep or anything this way, he has to set the edge. Always want an edge contain to the defense or a way to force the ball back to the inside. Same thing on the other side. If you do get double tight, we then want to walk him up. And again, nothing changes on the interior gaps. They have now edge contained to the outside, and you can play any zone runs to you by just everybody fitting their gap. So once again, if he fits his gap, he fits his gap, he fits his gap, he fits his gap, it should look something like this. And I always use a brick wall analogy because there shouldn't be anywhere for the running back to run. If for whatever reason they run the ball up the middle and nobody pulls or nothing, it's just a straight run up the middle, there's a good chance that one of your players got greedy and tried to go over to a different gap. So this nose who has this A gap right here, he might have got greedy and done this, and then all of a sudden you see this player in open field with your safety, he makes one cut and he's off to the race. We see it all the time. So you have to understand that each player needs to know what gap they have. That way, when the ball hits that gap, you know who's responsible for the missed gap assignment. If it's a missed tackle, you can clean that up. So for instance, if the ball does leak to your rover to the outside and he just comes up and misses the tackle, you don't have a scheme issue, you have a player issue. Okay? So you can patch up the player issue, but scheme-wise, you're okay. And that's how I always like to look at it is, are we wrong scheme-wise or are we wrong player-wise? Scheme-wise, like we just said, if he dips here and he hits this here, well, now we have no one in the A gap. So that's, as a coach, how you can troubleshoot all of the issues. Okay, next we're going to talk about coverages. And cover 3 is the most basic way to teach at a youth perspective, cover 3, especially if you don't see a ton of passing. It's also the safest way to make sure that all the deep routes are capped up and you don't get a ball thrown over your head. There is a weakness to it, which you just need to be aware of, but for the most part, it's a pretty clean, easy defense to teach. We're going to teach you the spot dropping version of it, meaning that everybody, when they see pass, is going to drop to a spot and then play from there. So starting with the rover to the outside, we're going to use this blue floating box as our way to teach what area of the field they have. We'll also put a visual on the screen now, which you can take a second screenshot if you'd like, as far as how to teach all the areas of the field. But we found this is the easiest way to do it. So from the hash to the sideline, we call these the flats. So this rover is responsible for the flat. So when the ball snapped, he should work outwards to make sure that no hitch from number 1 is thrown. You don't want this to happen because he should be able to get out to here and cover the flat. Next, we have what's called the hook curl area. And this is from both linebackers. Flats extend from the hash to the sideline and the hash to the sideline on both sides. So it's the same mirrored thing for the rover and for the will. The Sam and Mike have what's called the hook curl area, because this is where the hook and the curl balls are thrown. And this is from I call it 5 yards inside the hash to about 3 yards outside the hash. So they need to just extend to this area, get width, and then start to get depth as they're dropping out. But this area for both sides is they're covering that hook curl area, while the rover and the will are expanding out into the flat. So if you see here, you should have this area covered, this area covered, this area covered, and then this rover will extend out to the flat. So you have 4 underneath defenders to take away any short throws. And then for the cornerbacks, again, I said it earlier, and I really want to reemphasize this, they are slow backpedaling out. The worst thing you want to do is fly out of there as fast as possible because you don't want to get beat deep. Nice slow backpedal. And they have what's called the deep third. When you think cover 3, think the field's divided up into thirds. Cover 2, field's divided into halves. Cover 4, it's divided up into fourths. So cover 3, I have deep third. Same with the free safety here. I have deep third. And then this corner here, I have deep third as well. So everybody takes an area of the field. They all expand out. And then that way we can cover the field in a balanced way. Especially if the teams that you're playing don't throw the ball deep very well, you still have enough players to rally down to any of the short throws. All right, next we're going to jump into simple blitzes that you can run from this. That's super easy to install. So if you're already in your 31 front, and we talked about the Sam, he looks in this gap, there's nobody in that gap, so he has the A gap. Mike, he has this gap right here because there's nobody in it. So now when you blitz, you can use the same principles as you blitz. So if you were to call a cover zero blitz, a simple gap blitz, meaning everyone's just going to hit their gap on the snap, you get a 6-man pressure here from everybody coming through, and then all the coverages on the back end is everybody has their man up. So man up, the will would have this man up, corner has this man up, and then the free safety is going to step into the box and they will have the running back on the back end. And the reason we like to do this is because just in case one of these players up front, let's say the nose gets greedy like we talked about earlier and he goes into this gap and they run an inside zone play. You see it happen all the time and he makes one cut and then bang, he's off to the races. You'll at least have somebody in the box to mirror the running back. That way they can step in and make a tackle. If you, for whatever reason, blitz from the edges and this guy comes on the outside, you may not have that player in the middle of the field. So I always like to just keep this player in the middle of the field just in case something does break loose. You at least have some sort of safety valve to be able to step in and make the play. Now, how can you get creative from this? We talked about a 3-1 is a 31 front. One other blitz you can run from this as well is you go 22, meaning you go head up the guards, and then your Sam or Mike will make a left call or a right call. And that just tells these players here, hey, when we go left, or you could use names, Larry, Lisa, anything with L going left, these players go to the left, and then these players will go to the right. So you now notice we are getting some movement, and we're still bringing 6, okay, with the defensive end off the edge as well. So if you want to confuse your opponent a little bit, you can do that by saying left. You can have your Sam tell the tackle to go left and he's going right, and then you can have your Mike tell your nose to go right and then he can go left. Obviously, you need to develop some sort of communication for that. I found it easiest to tell everybody to go left or everyone to go right. That way there's no confusion and you can run it from there. So those are the simplest blitzes to run. Again, you're just trying to gain pressure and trying to create confusion on the offensive line and for the offensive coordinator. So if you have any comments or any questions about playing the 4-4 and installing it into a youth program, let us know in the comment section below. I read all the comments and I'm happy to help out any way that I can. If you do want to learn more about playing with trips, pulling guard, blitzes, and so much more, we thought it'd be better to put it in the course. That way you can learn it from there as opposed to making an hour to 2 hour long video. So check that out. Again, if you have any questions, use me as a resource. I'm happy to help out, and we'll see you next time.